Mine too. All right. For the recording, welcome back. We are ACI Course 7, Class 6. It's February 6, 2025. Let's gather our minds here as we usually do. Please bring your attention to your breath until you hear from me again. Now bring to mind that being who for you is a manifestation of ultimate love, ultimate compassion, ultimate wisdom. And see them there with you. They are gazing at you with their unconditional love for you. Smiling at you with their holy great compassion. Their wisdom radiates from them. That beautiful golden glow encompassing you in its light. And then we hear them say, bring to mind someone you know who's hurting in some way. Feel how much you would like to be able to help them. Recognize how the worldly ways we try fall short. How wonderful it will be when we can also help them in some deep and ultimate way, a way through which they will go on to stop their distress forever. Deep down, we know this is possible. Learning about karma and emptiness, we get glimpses into how it's possible. And so I invite you to grow that wish into a longing. And that longing into an intention. Then turn your mind back to your precious holy being. We know that they know what we need to know. What we need to learn yet. What we need to do yet to become one who can help this other in this deep and ultimate way. And so we ask them, please teach us that. And they are so happy that we've asked. Of course, they agree. Our gratitude arises. We want to offer them something exquisite. And so we think of the perfect world they are teaching us how to create. We imagine we can hold it in our hands, and we offer it to them, following it with our promise to practice what they teach us, using our refuge prayer to make our promise. Here is the great earth, filled with fragrant incense and covered with the blanket of flowers. The great mountain, 4 lands, wearing the jewel of the sun and the moon. In my mind, I make them the paradise of a Buddha and offer it all to you. By this deed, may every living being experience the pure world. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community. Through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest, may we reach Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community. Through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest, may we reach Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community. Through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest, may all beings reach their total awakening for the benefit of every single other. So last class we learned the second 9 of the 18 root bodhisattva vows. I will avoid destroying towns and such. I will avoid teaching emptiness to a person not yet mentally prepared. I will avoid causing a person to turn back from total enlightenment. I will avoid causing a person to give up their morality of freedom. I will avoid holding that a person cannot eliminate desire and such by following the way of the listener. I will avoid professing the complete opposite. I will avoid accepting what belongs to the 3 jewels when someone presents it to me. I will avoid rejecting the practice of quietude and giving the possessions of meditators to those who practice recitation. That's pretty specific. I will avoid giving up the wish for enlightenment. So, number 11, I will avoid teaching emptiness to a person not yet properly prepared. We learned that we don't actually break that vow until some result has occurred. Do you remember? So the breaking of the vow happens when the person that we were teaching emptiness to, a Mahayana practitioner that we're teaching emptiness to, gets our teaching, causes them to have a mistaken understanding, and they get scared, and as a result they give up the Mahayana and focus instead on the Hinayana level of practices and teachings. So we don't break the vow until that result happens. Technically, no matter how bad our emptiness teaching is, but I don't throw that in to say, so, teach emptiness, it doesn't matter. My point is, the vow is very specific how it gets broken. It's still a guideline for our behavior, not just to say, oh, I can't ever break that vow, so I won't worry about it. Right? But rather, how would I get close? And we don't get close when we're careful to teach emptiness carefully according to the level of the student. And how are we going to know that? Except by watching their reaction, seeing whether they do the homework, right? It's the emptiness teacher's, bodhisattva emptiness teacher's job to see how it goes. Yeah. Then the 13th root downfall is the one that says causing a person to give up their morality of freedom. So that means someone who is keeping their pratimoksha vows, you encourage them to come up to the Mahayana, right? Because they're keeping their freedom vows well, they have the goodness to hear someone say, wow, you're ready for Mahayana. And they encourage them to come up to the higher teachings. And in the process, that bodhisattva encouraging the person to come up also says, and when you do Mahayana, you don't need those lower vows anymore. And because of what we said, that person goes, oh, great, right? I'll kill, steal, lie, because now I'm a Mahayanist and I'm doing it for the benefit of all sentient beings. So it doesn't matter if I do those lower negativities. Do you see? And it's like, what does Jetsun Kappa say about that conclusion? That as a Mahayanist, you don't need your lower vows? That's like a rain of hell on your tender corn crops that are going to destroy your whole crop, which means it destroys your prosperity and it destroys the happiness of other people, because the people you were going to feed with those crops, they're not going to get it. So disastrous to imply or say outright, once you're at Mahayana level, you don't have to worry about your Mahayana or your Hinayana vows. Because the pratimoksha vows are the foundation of our bodhicitta, as we all know. Okay, so thank goodness we're so well trained. And then lastly, your quiz asked, the 18th and which other vow are particularly serious and don't require having all those 4 chains in mind to be present in order to break the vows? And we remember from previous class, it was vow number 9, which is, I will avoid holding wrong views. And if you recall, that meant we had already gotten over those wrong views, the wrong view of not knowing or believing that in karma and its consequences, and not knowing or believing in past and future lifetimes. Because those two beliefs, the implication of them is, well, then my behavior and my experiences actually have no connection. When in fact, our behavior and our experiences are deeply, integrally connected, just not one after the other. So either of those wrong views would lead us to feel that there's no consequences from our actions. And so morality wouldn't matter. And so my behavior doesn't matter. And with that attitude, none of the other vows make any, they just would not, right? They would not make any sense at all. So then we learned that of these 18 root bodhisattva vows, the behavior through which we keep or break them is very much more specific than what just the words of their title imply. And yet, historically, anyone who receives a tantric initiation at any level receives bodhisattva vows, whether they were aware of it or not. And then they may or may not ever get taught what they are, in which case, how would you ever know whether you're keeping them or breaking them? And, the lamas wouldn't do that if we're in such great danger of like destroying our chances by having vows and not knowing them. But Geshe Michael's premise is, how can you really have and keep those vows if you don't really know what they are? So in our lineage, the lamas are always careful to teach about bodhisattva vows before the student, and lets the student decide when they're ready to commit themselves to both the wish, the prayer, and then to the action, actually getting the vows. And they're the only vows that we actually get that. It is what he always says. And yet we learned about 5 lifetime lay vows before we took them, if you did. But ordained vows, which is where those, right, in the freedom vows, pratimoksha vows, which is where those 5 lay vows are. The other vows in that category are ordained vows and the one-day vows, Mahayana vows. And with those, traditionally, you're not taught about those vows. You can hear them. If you attend an ordination ceremony, you will hear what they are if you know what you're listening for. So it's not that they're secret and you're not allowed to know, but you don't get this opportunity to hear what they are and think, do I think I could live that way or not? When you're moved to take ordination, it's because you have this idea of what that means of committing yourself, and then you take them, and then you learn what you've vowed to give up. So Bodhisattva vows are unique in this way and special in this way. And another way that we've learned Bodhisattva vows are special is that those vows carry on in our mind stream beyond this lifetime. Our freedom vows, our individual freedom vows, they apply to this individual life. So they end at the end of this life. And the ramification of them going on is deep. Like, I haven't thought it really through. So I don't know, maybe we've had them before. And I was in my 40s when I got them the first time in this life. What was happening the rest of those 43 years if I already had my bodhisattva vows and I didn't even know it? Anyway. So thank you to the lamas who explain the specifics of these vows. So we're not left trying to figure it out ourselves from the wording of the vows. Now, then we also have heard repeatedly that to fully break the root downfalls, we have to have these things, this state of mind called the 4 chains active for 16 of those 18 vowed behaviors that we are avoiding. And when we see what those 4 are, we'll see why the root downfalls are root downfalls and why they're so serious when they're broken. Because of these 4 states of mind that are included in the doing of the deed. They're so ugly, they're so negative, that they have such a strong impact on our mind that it blocks other stuff growing in our mind in a strong way. So if we break a bodhisattva root downfall, there are 3 serious consequences of that. The first is we cannot reach the first bodhisattva bhumi in this lifetime. Right, so this lifetime that we have taken our vows and are trying to keep them, and we break one, that deed has such a strong negative influence on our mind that we no longer have sufficient virtue that could ripen into our direct perception of emptiness with bodhicitta in our heart. So we reach the first bodhisattva bhumi as we come out of the direct perception of emptiness for the first time, having gone into that experience with a mind-heart imbued with our wish to reach total enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. It means we're on the conveyor belt to our Buddhahood, not just to our nirvana, beyond nirvana. So breaking a root vow, any of the root vows, blocks that ability. Second serious consequence of breaking a root vow is that even as we still accumulate other good deeds, the effect of the breaking of the root vow is such that those good deeds can't accumulate. They can't contribute to the virtue such that we would start towards that direct perception of emptiness. So not only does it block the ability to see emptiness directly, it blocks the ability to gather the goodness. Right? So it's double whammy. Because it takes extraordinary virtue seeds to ripen as the direct perception of emptiness. And by breaking a root vow, you have blocked whatever virtue you had from growing. And you've blocked the ability of new virtue to add to your old virtue. It's like your virtue bank account is frozen and you can't access it to even add new to it. Like you have a new bank account, virtue bank account that's going in, but that virtue isn't growing. It's just sitting there. So what's already there has been damaged, and what's going in newly. It's like we have such negativity in the mind that even as good as we're being, the negativity just sucks its goodness down to where it can't get over the threshold. It can't even grow. So wait, let me finish first and see if it all comes together. So we've heard that, yeah, but you can restore your vows, and we'll learn how. And even when we do what we need to do to purify and restore those vows, that having broken the vow, negativity still has this influence on our mind of this life, such that we still can't reach the first bodhisattva bhumi. So yes, we can restore our vows, and yes, we can start growing our virtue again, but not such that that virtue will ever make it over the threshold of manifesting as the direct perception of emptiness with bodhicitta in our heart. So our vows get restored, but not to their full glory of what they are when we first get them. And it all has to do with the influence of the negativity that was involved in breaking, fully breaking, not just damaging, fully breaking. So then the third consequence of breaking a root vow is that it makes it very difficult to meet spiritual teachers in our future. And they don't say which future, right? They just say future. So my guess it's future this life, future lives. Because it's so disrespectful to have vows and then fully break. So now the good news is that it takes these 4 very specific attitudes in our mind as we do the deed to actually fully break the corresponding vow. And those 4 specific terrible negativities need to stay there. So it gets slippery when we hear this. about the 4 chains. We see how serious they are to avoid, and then we hear like what happens over time. Anyway, we'll get there. We'll study these 4, called the 4 chains, so that we can understand them, so that we can avoid having them, so that we can think of their opposite and grow those states of mind instead that will help protect us from ever having all 4 in mind. If we don't have even one of the 4, when we do that, ugly deed of one of the bodhisattva vows, you don't break the vow. You damage it, you create negative karma, but you don't break the vow, and so you don't have this block to the first bodhisattva bhumi, or this block to still adding to your root virtue, right? But it could be close. If you don't break the vow, you don't get the results of breaking the vow. If you do, you do. It's pretty straightforward. So these 4 chains, they're called kuntishi. It's spelled like this, kuntrishi. She means the number 4. But when Geshe says it, listen carefully, it's kuntishi. Somehow that R is like rolled back or something, so you can't hear it. Kuntishi. And kunti means like a vine wrapped around a pole, like ivy wrapped around a sapling tree trunk. The ivy is going to choke that little tree and probably kill it. And so kunti is this different way of talking about mental afflictions, nyomong. They are these vines that wrap around our mind and choke out its goodness. And it doesn't just wrap once, right? It wraps a lot, which is how it comes to be called the 4 chains, because we're like all chained up by it and we can't get free. The word kunti is used in other contexts as well for mental afflictions. In the Abhidharma level of teachings, the kosha apparently gives a list of what are called the kuntis, but they're not related to these 4. Well, they're not directly related to these 4 having to do with our bodhisattva vows. They're just the word, they're the words that Abhidharma uses for these main mental afflictions, and you'll know them when you hear them. Abhidharma lists the kunti, right, the chain of a lack of sense of shame, meaning not having enough self-conscientiousness to avoid a wrong deed, meaning avoiding a wrong deed even if nobody would ever know. A high level of self-conscientiousness is, I won't do that even if nobody would ever know. To not have that state of mind is a kunti. It's a chain. Then to not have the chalyu, the consideration for others, the sense of avoiding a negative deed because of the impact it would have on the other person or anyone who became aware that we did it. Right? To use others as our criteria for choosing a behavior. To not have that consideration is one of these chains, not related to the bodhisattva vows that the Abhidharma Kosha is pointing out. Then that it also says to have to do a deed out of jealousy it's a mental affliction, right? And so they call it this chain. If we do a deed out of stinginess, if we do a deed out of wild desire, if we do a deed out of regret, which is curious, if we do a deed out of dullness or drowsiness, if we do a deed out of outright anger, and if we do a deed out of wanting to conceal our faults, all of those are states of mind that are called a chain, a kunti. But they are not the ones we're talking about that are the four chains that are involved in breaking a bodhisattva vow. So the four chains, the first one is to have this state of mind where you do not consider what you've done or what you're about to do as being something wrong. So let's just take the first bodhisattva vow, praising myself and criticizing another. And we heard about how specifically it's two Mahayana teachers. And because of your mental affliction, you're going to intentionally either praise yourself to get the advantage or criticize that one to other people in order to get them to not like them so much, right? Either one. The first of the chains is to like decide and do either one of those deeds, not thinking that it's wrong, right? If you don't think it's wrong, you're going to do it. Jetsun Kappa says, when you're planning the deed, you don't think it's wrong. When you're doing the deed, you don't think it's wrong. After you've done the deed, you don't think it's wrong. And he says, and forever after. Anytime you think of it, not a wrong deed. So, if we're trying to think, how would I avoid that? It would be, anything that we do, we could stop and consider, right, is there any way that this deed could in any way be a wrong deed? And it's slippery because we could easily fall into the, well, I can't do anything right then. And so woe is me, I'm just a jerk and I'm going to give up. And that's not the point. It's to just have this healthy sense of, I'm trying my best, I'm trying to sort it out. I'm going to try to keep my motivation as pure. And then for this particular vow, it would be, okay, maybe there's some other way I can get my point across, and I don't have to criticize them to somebody else to do it. Right? Because we've considered maybe that would be a wrong deed. Okay. So to not have that consideration at all ever, we would have to have this really ugly state of mind, really ignorant state of mind, and then have to stay that way in order for the vow to be broken. So Geshe-la says it's great to always have a little bit of doubt in your mind about the deed that you're gonna do, are doing, have done. Might it harm somebody? Second chain is that you're willing to do it again. If we had no belief that what we did was wrong, then of course we'd be willing to do it again. You know, in the same situation, you do exactly the same thing. And this would need to be in your mind during the planning, says Jetsukapa, and doing the deed, and after. So then, if ever we realize that, no, I won't do that again, even if I still think it's right, something happened that made me decide, no, I won't do that again. Even better would be if at some point we said, figured out, oh man, that was a wrong deed. Our next thought would be, I don't think I'll do that again. So again, that little bit of doubt helps us think, is the deed I'm planning to do something that regardless of what the apparent result was, I would do again, right? Is my motivation and my conviction in the doing the deed's necessity so strong that I'm gonna be willing to do it again? When we don't have that, we have a bit of regret. Regret usually comes after the fact. Technically, we can learn to have a little bit of regret even as we're doing something. We'll talk about it later. And it's an unpleasant state of mind that's a virtue, they say. Because regret means I did something wrong, and I'm really sorry. It's not pleasant, but it's a good deed to have it. Your reading will say the classical monastic example for this chain number 2 is for an ordained person who's overwhelmed by sexual desire, and they know they're going to break that vow. And they know it's a wrong deed, but they know they just can't help themselves. And they regret it even before they do it, but their regret isn't strong enough to override the desire, and the event happens. They don't lose their ordained vows because of that event. They've damaged them. They've created negativity, yes. But because of like, I know I just can't help myself. I know this is not keeping my vows well. That state of mind is actually protective. The secondary bodhisattva vows are they are easier to damage and break. Because we damage and break them regardless of the 4 chains. So technically, they all come out of the root 18. And when we do a deed that damages a root vow but doesn't fully break it, we would be able to find that deed in the secondary vows, where if we had kept the secondary vow better, it would have helped us protect our root vow. But anyway, we'll get there. To do a root vow behavior without all 4 chains damages one or more of the secondary vows, is what I'm trying to say. So the 3rd chain is that we enjoyed doing it, right? We are enjoying doing it when we did it. They don't mention it, but probably we're enjoying planning it out. We enjoyed doing it, and we're satisfied that we have done it. And we already said chain number 2 was I'd be willing to do it again. Can see how these go together. And if you didn't think it was wrong, you're more likely to enjoy doing it. I mean, it's not a given that you enjoy doing something that you know is right, but in order to not enjoy doing something, one would probably have to be thinking there's something wrong with what you're doing. By being glad, we'll want to do it again. We would be willing to do it again. So any regret helps us protect our vow, because with regret, we're not going to enjoy it. With regret, we're not going to want to do it again. With regret, even a little bit, it implies that we understand that even though, you know, deep down, I still think it was right. I see that, right? I still have a little bit of regret that this was the way I solved my issue. And this holds for while we're doing it and any time afterwards. So we can have enjoyed criticizing that other teacher and gonna do it again and didn't think it was wrong. And then, I don't know, like sometime in the future, we go, oh, maybe that was a mistake. Yuck. You know, yuck, that wasn't so pleasurable after all. They say the vow then is not broken. You got to work this one out, because our intellectual mind is going to go, wait, it was broken? And now to suddenly decide, oh, that wasn't fun after all. All of a sudden, the vow's not broken? Well, do I need to restore it then, or don't I? Is it back to its full glory, or isn't it? I don't have answers to that. It shouldn't make us complacent. Well, someday in the future, I'll regret what I just did, and I'll just wait till then, and then my vow will be restored, and everything will be back in 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 virtue making mode. But how long did that take? And how much suffering did I perpetuate in my world while I was getting my vow unbroken all of a sudden? So it's encouraging to hear we're not doomed when we have these four chains, but it shouldn't be so encouraging that we will let ourselves let fly with our mental afflictions and justify our behavior, right? Because of the damage that gets done. So that's three of the four. The fourth one, it has two parts. Notsa and Trelyu are the two protective states of mind. Notsa means shame, and Trelyu means consideration. It's those same first two that the Abhidharma was pointing out as their two of their, however many that was, 10, I think, mental afflictions. So notsa, they translate the word as shame. Shame means I did something that was wrong and I'm embarrassed if someone would hear about it. This notsa is self-shame. It's a sense of, if I do a certain deed and nobody ever knew about it, I would still feel upset. And so to have that sensibility when we're choosing our deeds, we choose a deed based on avoiding a deed that we ourselves would be embarrassed for ourselves if we did it, even if nobody ever knew. Right? To me, shame isn't the right word. Self-conscience is often used, but that isn't quite right either. That's just self-awareness. Conscientiousness is a little better. Self-conscientiousness is closer, I think, to this idea of holding myself accountable. But then usually conscientiousness means because other people will see. And here this one, notsa, is doesn't matter if nobody ever knows but me. I'm better than that, right? It's really a self-consideration. To not have notsa when we do our deed contributes to the breaking of the vow. You see how, right? Because if you don't think the criticizing the other teacher is wrong, and you'll do it again, and you enjoy doing it, well, then when you think to yourself about having done it, there's no sense of, gosh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Even if nobody ever knew, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Because the other three chains say, no need to even think about it that way. But if we have this sense of, is this the kind of deed that I want my own mind to see me do? If we have that habit, even if we think the deed is right, and we think about it carefully, it's like, well, maybe I don't really want to do that. Right? I'm sure it's right, but maybe there's some other way I could do this deed. Do you see how it's protective of your vow? And then you would say, so the deed I was planning to do that now my notsa is telling me not to do, that also will run into the whether or not I'm willing to do it again. If I'm not willing to do it the first time, hopefully it means I'm not willing to do it a second time, or third or fourth or fifth. And then our self-consideration will also help us assess whether the deed that we've done or doing was an enjoyable thing. Right? So our self-consideration is a strong protective state of mind. And when we don't have it, as we're planning, as we're doing, as we're thinking about that deed, that's one of the chains that allows us to fully break our vow. The other part of that is trelyu, to not have trelyu, which the word for that is trelme. He didn't give us the word for the not having notsa. Trelyu is this word for consideration, meaning consideration of the impact our deed will have on others, not just the karmic impact, but the influence that we would have. So, like a obvious level or a gross level of that would be, suppose people in your neighborhood know you're a Buddhist and know you're vegetarian and, know that about you. But they don't know that you're also, a Diamond Way practitioner, and they don't really even know what those are. And they see you out at a local restaurant doing sok, which includes apparently eating meat and drinking alcohol, which you, the practitioner, are not actually doing, but it looks like you are. And the neighborhood people go, "What's up with you? You're a vegetarian. What are you doing?" Do you see? Now, on one level, maybe it's time for them to know. But on another level, maybe they're going to say, those Buddhists, they say they're vegetarian one moment and the next moment they're not. It's like, I can't believe them. It's one's responsibility to uphold, right? The neighborhood's high opinion of other Buddhists. About me, I don't care. I do care, but you don't have to care. But the impact it would have on their opinion of other Buddhists. That's what we're talking about here, right? Not just, what are they going to think about me? Because we're at bodhisattva level, right? So it's tricky, this trellis state of mind. It's really a powerful, beautiful state of mind. Our consideration for how we impact others in their worldview. And when we don't have that consideration, I don't care one wig how the neighborhood thinks of other Buddhists. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is get them to Buddhahood as quickly as possible. And this is how I'm going to do it. And it's like, do you see? Very easily could become, so this is right. I'm enjoying doing it. I will do it again. And like in the gross vernacular, screw everybody else. Like the total opposite of bodhisattva's state of mind. So we can see how ugly these four are. This fourth is, I just don't care my impact on anybody else. And I don't care the impact on me. Do you see how ugly? No wonder all that virtue gets locked up. It does not get like disintegrated. It just gets frozen. your virtue bank account gets frozen, says Geshe Michael. You can't draw from it and you can't add to it. For forever? Well, for until you restore your vows. But then even then, no, you can't quite restore it to full glory. But still, it'll start accumulating again. And next lifetime will be the one that you hold your bodhisattva vows more carefully and can reach the bodhisattva bhumi in that lifetime, hopefully. Right? No guarantee. Bodhisattva vows are not vows that are said to ripen in this lifetime. Yes, Joanna.
I have a question regarding this lifetime thing.
Me too.
So is there a kind of imprint in the seed that marks this is the lifetime we broke the vow, so this is going to the frozen bank account, but you can't withdraw in this picture? And then when we start our next lifetime, there's no information in the seed, so you can draw from. I mean, how does our seed know when my lifetime is over and the bank account is open again?
I don't know. It doesn't open the bank account just by dying and getting reborn, right? You have to do something to open the bank account back up. So, we're going to learn how to open the bank account back up. The moral to the story is don't close the bank account, right? Whatever you do. But do you see how specific those root vows are? With the exception of two. The holding wrong views and the I quit. Not just, I don't think I can do it. This is so hard. It's going to take me forever. It's like, I quit. Which would be the ramification of deciding that behavior doesn't create my future. Right? That's almost the same thing as saying I quit, because there's no connection at all. So to break any root vow breaks all your bodhisattva vows. Because of those 4 chains that need to be intact with the 16 of them. And because of the ramification of those 2 states of mind from vow 9 and vow 18. Do you see? So when we look at our 18 root vows, they aren't really that hard to fully break, because you have to have those 4 really ugly states of mind. And hopefully none of us are even close to those. However, that's why we check our vows regularly, because it's not the vows we're checking our behavior. We're checking our states of mind. We're checking the level at which we blame other for our experience. Because when we've got full on blaming them, that's when we believe that our action towards them is the right one to do. And if it's the right one to do, I'll do it again. And, it felt good. And, right, because it's not wrong, of course I have no self-shame about it. Because it's right. And of course it's going to have a favorable impact on others because it's right. Okay. Let's take a break. Here. Stop that. What's that doing there? Is my share still up?
Yes.
Oh, there it is. There it is. I didn't have the stop share. Now I can pause the recording. Putting back on. I don't think I need the screen share. Okay, so in those 4 chains, we can see how actually the 4th chain, not having self-conscientiousness or other consideration, no, is a key, is it like a key to all 4 being intact, which means that to have this healthy sense of self-conscientiousness and other consideration, it's protective from breaking our bodhisattva vows. It's protective in damaging our secondary vows. It helps us even work with our 10 non-virtues virtues, right? It's a really healthy state of mind to have this, my self-worth holds me to this behavior, and it won't let me do anything less than that. Unless we're wildly mentally afflicted, etc. But even then, we don't have don't think it's wrong, enjoy doing it, we'll do it again, when we have this healthy sense of, right, my own self-esteem and my concern for the impact on others and their, right, opinion, not about me, but about whatever, right, however that influence would impact them. Then when we look at all 4 chains, those 4 states of mind need to be active while we're planning, while we're doing, and ever after. And that would take a really deluded, selfish, ignorant state of mind. And it's hard to even conceive. We're so well trained before we get our bodhisattva vows. How could that even happen? But it must. Because this is the set of vows where we learn about these 4 chains. And Flavia asked last week, do the 4 chains apply to our 5 lifetime lay vows? And I went in and checked the ceremony for the 5 lifetime lay vows, and I checked the course 9 where Geshe-la talked about that, and I don't find any discussion about those 5 requiring the 4 chains in order to be broken. So they still require the 4 parts of a path of action to be fully broken. And we had that long discussion about what that looks like and how karma works. But the 4 chains specifically apply to our bodhisattva deeds. And then later they're extended also, well, I don't want to say that. They apply to the bodhisattva root downfalls. And not even the secondary ones that we'll see in a minute why. There's a practice some people do where 6 times a day you recite these verses, and part of that recitation is to recite the title of all your vows, your refuge vows, your ordained vows, your bodhisattva vows. And then at the end of the 18 root downfalls, not the 46, but the 18, there's a verse that says, 16 of these I can do with all 4 chains. Not to think the thing is wrong, not to want to stop it, to do it with pleasure and gladness, with no shame for myself or consideration for others. Two, though, I can do without their being all four, holding views that are wrong and abandoning the wish. So it's a nice review of the four chains that we can tell ourselves a couple of times a day to help us not grow those four chains, right? To have them in the succinct way of describing them to ourselves, we can check, do I have that self-shame in a positive state or consideration for others? Am I thinking the thing is right or wrong? Not right or wrong in it from it, but seeds planted that when they come back to me, they will be something that's helpful, or seeds planted that when they come back to me will be something that's not helpful. Right? That's probably a better way of describing right or wrong, because it's not the deed, it's the result the deed will bring that establishes it, as we know. So we have learned that there is a practice whereby 6 times a day you check your vows, you check your behavior according to your vows. And I think everybody's learned how to do that. They call it keeping the book. And we have refuge advices, we have our pratimoksha vows, maybe we have our bodhisattva vows, maybe we're just going to try them on for size. And so every couple of hours, you check your behavior against one of them. And, if you have 2 or 3 of them that you're checking a day, you'll go through the 18, right? Every 6 days. And then the 46 that we're going to learn might take a little bit longer. But when we actually write our book at the beginning of the day, the writing it and rewriting it and rewriting it helps us learn the vows, at least the names of the vows. And then using them to guide our behavior. We do the onion skin thing, of course, to help us. Now we have also these 4 chains, not to do a separate box, but to be looking in our mind for the behavior that we're noting. It's like, did I do it because I didn't think it was wrong? Did I do it because I knew it was wrong, but I thought it needed to happen? Right? Would I do it again? You don't have to stop and write it down, but think about it with keeping your bodhisattva vows. Geshe in this class, people were just learning when he was teaching this class for the first time. And he said, I know people have trouble like stopping what they're doing every couple of hours to do this, because there's always another phone call. There's always something else you need to do that's more important. He says, when your timer goes off to keep your book, whatever you're doing, whoever you're with, excuse me, I have to go to the toilet. Nobody ever says no to you. And you are going to the toilet, so it's not that you're lying. You're just not necessarily, gonna use the toilet except to sit in the stall and write your book. Right? You've got privacy, right? You can turn your phone off. You can at least ignore your phone. It really is a very skillful way. Probably they wonder, what's up with that Sarani? She's always going to the bathroom. It's like, doesn't matter, right? Who cares? Okay. The purpose of keeping our book is to train ourselves in our mindfulness of our behavior in the in-between time. So it's not training us to write something in a book. It's about watching in the 2 hours in between. And sometimes that's hard to do, right? We get focused on the writing of the book, not the behavior that it's teaching us to do. Geshe has always said, if your mind knows it's being tracked, it will behave so much better than if it thinks nobody's looking. So again, those two states of mind, Notsa and Tralya, are who and what's looking. And it helps our ego mind behave a little better. It's very helpful. So what happens when we realize we've broken a bodhisattva root vow, which then means all our vows, all our bodhisattva vows are broken? That state, a full break of a root downfall, had to happen with the 4 chains, and that's called a big impurity. We've created a big impurity. And in order to repair the vows from a big impurity, we need to restore some amount of our munsam. I didn't write that down. Munsam means our prayer, our wishing bodhicitta, right? The mind that wishes to reach the mind it means the mind that wishes to have its bodhisattva vows back. The mind that wishes to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. That munsam needs to come back. I want that all on one page. So the wish in the form of the prayer. If we can get that back, even just a squeeze, then with that, we can go back to the one who gave us our vows and ask them to please give us our vows again. And, my guess is they're going to grill you to see what happened. And, is your munsam back? But it's not like it has to, your wish in the form of a prayer needs to be as big as it was when you first started. The bigger, the better, of course. But the scripture says even just a little bit, because a little bit of your wish to reach total enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings is enough to recognize, oh my gosh, that deed wasn't so right after all. And then that, I don't know, they don't use the term unbreaks the vow, but it sounds like that's what they mean. Suddenly, the vow wasn't broken, but you still have to take it again. So figure that one out. It's not that it gets unbroken, but the state of mind is there that can fix it. And yet again, it won't fix it to its full glory. What if you can't get at the one who gave you the vows to begin with? I don't know. Then they say, and there are circumstances with our root vows in which we damage them but don't fully break them. And there's a circumstance called committing a medium impurity and circumstances called committing small impurities. So impurity means to have planted seeds in our minds that are minor damages to those vows. And there's a criteria for what's medium and what's small. And what you do to restore the vow is different for a medium one, for a big impurity, for a medium one, and for a small one. So committing a medium impurity with our root downfalls means doing any one of those 16, right? Not number 9, not number 18. This doesn't apply to them. Doing any one of those 16, not thinking it was wrong. So you think it's right, but you only have 1 or 2 of those other 3 negative states of mind. Right? So you have the first state of mind. You don't think it's wrong. But then maybe you're not willing to do it again, this one time and never again. Or maybe like, I'll do it again, but I'm not enjoying this. Right? Or right, that somehow the shame and consideration is not there, but you have the other 3. Or it's there, but you're missing 1 of the other 3. You see, the important piece in a medium impurity is the fact that you don't believe that what you did was wrong. But what makes it a medium damage is that you don't have all 3 of the others. So you don't have all 4 chains. You with me? Any one of those 16 that is damaged in this way, the first one, and any 1 or 2 of the others, needs to be repaired by collecting 3 or more people who would understand and confessing before them. So doing a 4 powers of purification with 3 people who would understand you, hearing you do it. A small impurity is doing any one of those 16, knowing it's wrong, with 1 or more of the other factors also present. So you know it's wrong, but for some reason, you're going to do it anyway. But because you know it's wrong, even as you do it, you don't have all 4 chains intact, even if you have all 3 of the others. Right? Which probably you have number 4, insufficient self-consideration, other consideration, that you would let yourself do something that you know is going to come back to hurt you. Whether you'll do it again, whether or not you're having fun doing it. Do you see? So how these work together makes sense when you try to piece it together. If we don't think the deed is wrong, regardless of which of the others we have intact, as long as there's not all 4, it's a medium damage to the vow. If we know it's wrong, then regardless of how many of the other 3 are present, it's a small impurity. And the way we repair it is that we confess it to 1 other person who would understand. You know, do your 4 powers with that 1 person. Geshe-la said, when we do a small impurity and confess it to 1 other who would understand, we restore the vows to their former glory. So it's only when all four chains are intact that the vow is so broken that it can't be restored for those 16. Right. So that means our four powers of purification practice as our right confession and restoring our vows is a pretty important practice to get used to doing regularly, so that if there's any little damage to those vows, we get it fixed right away. That leaving the little damage seeds, those seeds grow, right? The ugliness will grow. And my guess would be that what would contribute to a circumstance where all of a sudden, right, we lose our whatever factor it was that was keeping us on the path. And suddenly we either quit believing about karma and emptiness, past and future lives, quit wanting to free all beings to reach Buddhahood to do it, or do one of those other 16 with all four chains intact. That's going to be a ripening result of some gathering selfishness that we're learning how to protect ourselves from. Right? That's what this is all about. So let's review the four powers of purification. It's this method through which mental imprints that we know we have, that when they ripen will be perpetuating suffering for ourselves and others, we decide, I don't want to let those seeds continue to grow. And in fact, I'd like to be able to damage them enough so that either they ripen sooner or lesser, or I damage them enough that they can't ripen at all. And we learned from Lord Buddha that there's a specific process that we can do called the four powers of purification, sometimes called the 4 R's: refuge, regret, remedy, and restraint. Sometimes the order is different. That's not so important, as all 4 need to be present, worked upon, as we work to damage those negative seeds that are the potential for unpleasant, perpetuating suffering in the future. So the first one, refuge, is also known as the basis force. So this is just a review. We've learned this in How Karma Works course. We'll hear it again in Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. There's actually a whole practice module that you can listen to. I've never taught that specifically, but there is one. So the basis force means recalling our refuge. We're recommitting to our level of refuge, which bodhisattvas have Mahayana refuge, which uses the steps shared with the lesser idea of refuge and grows it. So, but regardless, refuge still is recalling the power of karma and emptiness. That is the explanation for reality. And our refuge is directed towards Buddhas, who are beings who have used the marriage of karma and emptiness to transform themselves from suffering being to fully enlightened being, so they know, and are directly perceiving what we need to do as well. we rely upon the emptiness that they teach. We rely upon the emptiness of them. And we rely upon the emptiness of ourselves, our own mind, to as the basis that gets transformed by changing our behavior from selfish me to bodhisattva wannabe to full-on bodhisattva someday, because of the different way in which those seeds are planted at those different levels. So when we reestablish our refuge, we are mentally reasserting, I understand that everything I experience is a ripening result from causes made by what I was aware, my own mind was aware of me thinking, doing, saying towards another. Like, we let that sink on in really deeply to reconfirm that that means my current behavior creates the circumstances of my future. So I really am personally responsible for what I experience and what I create. And it's hard, it's a heavy burden, the Mahayana refuge. So in our 4 powers, we have this set of seeds we're wanting to clean out. The first thing we do is tell ourselves, tell whoever we're confessing to, I understand karma and emptiness in this way. And then where our mind will usually go is, and so by this deed that I saw myself do, the seeds that planted in my mind will probably come back as somebody doing that to me. And when that happens, I realize I am not going to like it. And so that means I regret having done that to the other. Even if at the time I did it, it seemed like it was the right thing to do. I just didn't have the right state of mind that recognized what seeds I'd be planting. I didn't think it through enough to think, well, I like this when it comes back to me. And what grows is our regret, that state of mind that says, oh, that was a mistake. Not, I'm wrong, I'm bad, I'll never get this right, but, right? I just perpetuated my mind, my own and others' ignorance and distress. So a healthy regret of an educated Buddhist is what they call this. It's not a whiny mental affliction, that brings us down. It's a healthy, virtuous state of mind. And their classical, well, what they call this regret is the destruction force. So the way we destroy those seeds is by regretting having made them. Like, that's not so hard, is it? And then they describe regret so beautifully with that story about the 3 hot and tired guys that run into the bar. They're in a hurry, they're exhausted, they're thirsty. The barkeep comes, she buys into their hurriedness. What do you have? That. She pulls it off the shelf, pours it into the 3 glasses. They go clink, salute, down the hatch. A few moments later, one guy seizes and drops over dead. And the other 2 guys are looking like, what just happened? The second guy seizes, drops over dead. The third guy's got regret, right? He knows what's coming. He knows we shouldn't have drunk that stuff. There's no self-judgment. There's no blaming the barkeep. That you don't have time for that. It's just, oh, shouldn't have done that. Regret. it's a really helpful story, I find, to help me remember that feeling of regret, right? To turn that on when we need it. Okay. With that deep regret will come the state of mind, I'll try really hard not to do that again. And that leads to the power of restraint, a necessary factor, because if we say, oh yeah, criticizing that other teacher, I see it was a wrong deed, and I do regret doing it, and the next time I'm in their presence, I do it again. It's like I stop taking my own mind seriously. It takes the wind out of the sails of my regret to say I regret it and then do it again. So regret is the destruction force, but restraint is the power that carries the destruction through time. So they tell us, when you establish your power of restraint, be realistic. It means I am not going to repeat that deed. And then fill in the blank there. If we're purifying something that we do habitually, don't say, I'll never do it again, because 10 minutes later, you'll be doing it again. And then your purification didn't work, and you've lied to yourself. So future purifications won't work very well. So you can say, I will not do that deed again for the first 10 seconds when I see that person who triggers my anger, right? I'll count like 10, 9, 8, 7. And then, yes, my regret will, or my anger will come, and I'll regret it and I'll purify it, but I kept my power of restraint. Yay. And that will help us keep it better and better and better. Establish a power of restraint. Then we also think, and I want to do a makeup activity, a remedy, an antidote. And the antidote, one method of training our antidote that can help us with our power of restraint is to establish what the opposite behavior would have been and do as our antidote that opposite behavior in some other place. Doesn't have to be towards the person involved in the behavior you're purifying, but train yourself in the opposite behavior will contribute to lessening the seeds of the original behavior so that your power of restraint gets better and you're planting the goodness of its opposite. So you're pulling away from it in these two different ways. Scripture, however, gives us these different methods for our antidote power. The most powerful one being study, learn, think about, meditate on emptiness, on the empty nature of the three spheres of the situation that you're purifying, but in general as well. So studying emptiness is the general purpose antidote to anything, because what it's antidoting is the ignorance, the belief in things is in them, from them, which is had to be a component in the situation in which we behave badly to solve a problem, because we believed that our behavior was going to solve that problem because the other person was the problem, right? And our behavior would fix it. That's why we do stuff. And that all those seeds have this misunderstanding in them, that if we're chipping away at the misunderstanding, then that's lessening all of that misunderstood behavior that we've done. The specific one we're purifying, and all the rest as well. All my wrong deeds from all time by studying emptiness. And it needs to be serious, right? Effort. Okay. So we have the four: the basis, refuge, the destruction power, regret, the power of restraint, specific, when I won't do it again, that I can do. And then the antidote, the specific deed or deeds that I will do to make up for the negativity. How long, how many? Until the karma shifts for recurring things. Until it's fixed, say the Lama. So I think we've heard the story about one of Ken Rinpoche's community members had been in the Vietnamese War, and his job was to clear the jungle of the enemy, and he never actually saw himself kill somebody, but he shot his machine gun into the jungle, and he came home saying, I probably killed people. How do I purify that? And Rinpoche knew that his father raised sheep to eat. And so Rinpoche gave this student the assignment: buy that sheep from your father. Like, give him the money for it. And then you take care of that sheep until it dies a natural death, which apparently takes 12, 15 years. So as the antidote to probably killing people, protect the life of this sheep. It didn't get eaten. For 15 years, he bought food and picked up after that sheep, right? As his antidote. So sometimes it takes a long time to fully clear, and we rely upon our lamas for that advice. All right. So lastly, in your reading, you'll see that Arya Sanga's text about the Bodhisattva vows, he says, actually, there's two ways to totally break your Bodhisattva vows, two ways to lose your Bodhisattva vows. One is to break a root vow, and the second is to go to the one who granted you their vows and formally give them back. So you can do that. If some circumstance were such that you just didn't think you could keep them anymore. Better to give them back than to just break them. But then if we examine the vows carefully, we actually come up with three ways that our Bodhisattva vows can be lost, meaning all of them. The first is to break a root vow with the four chains intact. That's what we talked about all night. That breaks that root vow, and it means we've lost all of them. Second way is to hold those wrong views. Something happens. We rethink this karma and emptiness, past and future lives. And we use clear thinking logic and come to the conclusion, can't be true. We lose all of our vows, our bodhisattva vows at that point. Yeah, we probably lose our refuge and our pratimoksha as well, but we're not talking about that. And then the third way is the 18th vow, to give up our wish for enlightenment, to say, I quit. But giving up our bodhicitta can happen in two ways. We can formally go to the Lama who gave us our Bodhisattva vows and say, I can't do it. Or we can have that fit of a mental affliction where we quit. Each one a little different circumstance. So it's useful to like think of those and just like think about what kind of circumstances, could possibly happen that might affect somebody in this way. And then, when I do that kind of mind challenge, I do think, oh, okay, I really want to avoid those behaviors. But then I also turn it around and think, well, what would the opposite behaviors be like? Like, what would I be like as a being who just couldn't do that? And then that gives me little glimpses into, how I want to train my own behavior. As opposed to, I will avoid this, I will avoid that. Do you feel the difference? It's like we're already avoiding that stuff. And so we just go along doing the same old, same old. Whereas if we're brainstorming, what would it be more like to be this high level bodhisattva who really is keenly aware, is this deed a deed that's contributing to suffering or not, or removing suffering, as we're deciding what we do next? It gives us, right, a glimpse into how we can raise our own behavior and opinion of ourselves, right? Standard for our own behavior. And that's why we have vows. The guidelines of those behaviors were given to us by an omniscient being who says, these are what we need to give up and take up. And as ignorant beings, we couldn't come up with that on our own. We'd come up with a different set. And probably we'd be missing something. So our vows are not restrictions. They are not because Buddha said so. They are, right? These are clues and helpful advices from someone who really loves us. Okay. That's our class 6. A lot of juicy material in class 6 that I know I've chewed on for years and still don't completely understand. But understand enough to try to live by them to the best of my ability. So remember that person we wanted to be able to help. We've learned a lot that we will use sooner or later to help them in that deep and ultimate way. And that's an extraordinary goodness. So please be happy with yourself. And think of this goodness like a beautiful glowing gemstone that you can hold in your hands. Recall your own precious holy being. See how happy they are with you. Feel your gratitude to them, your reliance upon them. Ask them to please stay close, to continue to guide you, help you, support you, inspire you, and then offer them this gemstone of goodness. See them accept it and bless it. And they carry it with them right back into your heart. See them there, feel them there. Their love, their compassion, their wisdom. It feels so good, we want to keep it forever. And so we know to share it. By the power of the goodness that we've just done, may all beings complete the collection of merit and wisdom, and thus gain the two ultimate bodies that merit and wisdom make. So use those 3 long exhales to share this goodness with that one person, to share it with everyone you love, to share it with every existing being everywhere. See them all filled with happiness, filled with loving kindness, filled with the wisdom, shining it forth to others. And may it be so. All right. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity. Thank you for doing your papers. I'm so impressed with everybody. We are Thursday. Have a nice weekend. I will see you